Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and this is the summary for the day of 703 to 705 for the 27th to 29th of January. So let's start off with some frontline changes, the frontline changes report. So the first one, there's two. So I already published the frontline changes report, which is around 11 minutes long. So there's just two more new ones since then. Over in the southern part of Avdiivka Front. So this is Avdiivka city at the southern part of Avdiivka Front. Deep State UA has updated their map to show that the Russian forces have captured a bit more of this southern neighborhood. They lost a bit more rather than the Russians conquered a bit more, because the Russians have captured it once before. And so this is currently the situation over in the southern part of Avdiivka. And over further east to this location, also at Avdiivka, according to the information from Ryba, the pro-Russian source, they reported that they have reached the outskirts of the Donetsk Filtration station, or the Filtration plant. So which means that if they are just on the outskirts, they did not have control of it, which means that the Ukrainians actually have control of this. So this actually means that this is a disclaim of this territory that was previously drawn as under Russian control. So this is the two updates in terms of the mapping since the last the frontline changes report. So we move on to the strategic and tactical reporting. We move to the border region in the Kharkiv Sumy region next to Belgorod region. So there is a few incidents. There is shelling being reported at this location called Mikhailivsky in the Sumy region. So this is actually a pretty far away from Kharkiv Front. So this is always very curious why the Russians are positioning forces in this area and attacking Ukrainian front line, or rather border troops, which may not be a threat. So that's actually a bit interesting. Is it some kind of a softening thing that they are trying to do? So, and there is also further reports within the Kharkiv region. There is FPV drones attacking Ukrainian forces at Kozachalopan, and also artillery shelling over at Kliboke, and further south there was another artillery shelling at Slobozhansky. So we have these few attacks in the front line of Kharkiv. This is always going to seem like, some kind of a preparation for a big assault, as I mentioned before, but so far have not happened just yet. Over at the Kupyansk Front. So this is Kupyansk city, and this is Kupyansk Front. At the Kupyansk Front, the Russian forces continue their Kupyansk offensive, particularly over in the Kreminna breakthrough. And but before we talk about that in details, there is fighting reported in the Sinkivka region. They are attacking Kotyarivka, Tebaivka, towards Berestove, and also towards Pischane. So this, and the Ukrainians counterattack over at Sinkivka, as well as at somewhere at Kreminna region. So over at Sinkivka, in details a bit more, there is geolocation which is reported in the frontline changes report. The Russian forces have basically captured this entire half of this forest region. The Ukrainians are counterattacking in this area here. So the situation seems to be moving slightly better for the Russians, and this seems to be a change of tactic for the Russian side, because previously the Russians have been attacking through the north directly, and rather than going through the difficult route of through the forest, where there could be a lot of ambushes and mines and whatnot. But after failing so many times, the Ukrainian forces basically cancelled all these attacks so many times, like over months. The Russian forces seems to have given up, and now they have do it the hard way and capture this forest region the proper way, in a way. So this is currently what's the situation over at Sinkivka. There is some geolocation of Ukrainian artillery getting hit by Russian artillery just north of Moskovska, and also in the north of Petropavlivka, FPV drones are attacking Ukrainian forces. So this is two locations that got hit. And over in the eastern part of the Kupyansk Front, there is geolocation of Ukrainian forces at Avdiivka getting attacked, and further south, this is where the Kreminna breakthrough is. So the Russian forces, after taking Kreminna, they sped up towards Kotelivka, and after that, as they go down the highway, they decided to fend westward towards Avdiivka, and they actually captured. This capture of Avdiivka has been acknowledged by the Russian Defense Ministry. They have confirmed the capture, and initially 2 days ago, the information was denied by the Ukrainian sources, and but after that, the next day, they realized through latest information that the settlement is largely evacuated off Ukrainian forces. They have all withdrawn to Pischane, and as per the last information, is now confirmed to be captured. And the Russian forces are also attacking in the west. Sorry, this way, in the eastern part of Pischane, towards Pischane. So which means that the Russians are making some kind of a pincer towards Pischane now, and any Ukrainian forces are over on the western part of Kreminna is going to be in trouble. So they may have to withdraw to form a better line of defense. So the situation now is pretty tricky. So at Berestove, there is a dispute. So there was some claims from pro-Russian sources which I did not see. I only because they are not in my trusted sources. It was argued by Deep State UA that Berestove is actually not captured, but they also acknowledge that the situation is very difficult. So there might be some kind of a push in this area here that may be threatening Berestove. The push towards Pischane is actually reported by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. So so there might be some possibility that the Russians, as they push in this direction, may actually swing down towards Berestove, just like where in the north, while the Russians are supposedly heading towards Kotelivka, they suddenly turn west towards the Avdiivka and capturing the town. So further south, there is Ukrainian. So we are now in the Svatove front already. The Ukrainian forces attack Novoselivsky, and that's all we know from this area here. Let me zoom out probably a bit better. So Ukrainians attack Novoselivsky, and the Russians attack Stemakivka. So that's all from this region here. Of course, if you look at the bigger strategic sense, you can okay, in this area here, it's a bit clearer. Kotelivka and Avdiivka, they're heading towards Pischane. They are heading west from south of Kreminna. They are attacking towards Berestove. Ukrainians counterattack at Kuzimivka. They also tried to attack the Avdiivka, and the Russians attacking Stemakivka. So this is the strategic situation over at this area here between Kupyansk and Svatove Front. And we move further south. There's nothing else over in this area here. So we go into the Kreminna Front. So this is Kreminna city. So this is the Kreminna Front. At the Kreminna Front, Russian forces attacking Kerny, Yampolivka, Toske, out of Dibrova and within the Siversk forestry. Ukrainians basically did more or less the same thing. They are counter-attacking at Kerny as well, Yampolivka. They are meeting the Russians also at Dibrova and that's about it. They did not counter within the Siversk forestry. Did they attack at Toske? Yes, they also counter-attack at Toske. So which means that there is heavy clashes in all the frontline regions except within the Siversk forestry, where the Russians seems to have the edge in this area here. There is multiple geolocations. Generally, I think there's no need to go through every one of them. I just realized that I over go through all these geolocations. However, there is some frontline changes over in the Terny Yampolivka region, which I reported in the frontline changes report. Ukrainians taking some grounds in this area, while the Russians taking more grounds in the western part of Yampolivka. Situation is continuing in this area here. We move to the Siversk Front. So this is Siversk. and this is Siversk Front. At the Siversk Front, the Russian forces continue their attack on Bilohorivka. The Ukrainians did try to counterattack, and then there was this interesting report coming from the Russian Defense Ministry. They claimed that they repelled an attack in Peresny. So this area is not near the front line. It's one town behind Rozdolivka. So a little weird. So we will continue to monitor and see what is this about. In the rear, the Russian forces continue to launch attacks on Ukrainian forces in the rear. I think I don't want to go through exactly what kind of weapon they use. It's either Lancet, FPV, or artillery systems. I think so that the video don't get so draggy. And over at the Bakhmut Front, in the northern half of the Bakhmut Front, so in this area here, the Russian forces continue their attack in Bodanivka region. The Ukrainians did counterattack as well. And there is geolocation of Ukrainian forces at Krychorivka as well as on the eastern part of Chasiv. And further south, in the southern flank, the Russian forces attack Ivanivsky. They continue their attack on Ivanivsky. They're attacking Klishevka as well as Andriivka. So this is the strategic situation. Ukrainian forces geolocated off the front line, so everything seems to be in check. Further south, there's nothing else in this area here. Geolocation by Crimean Caprice of Lancet operating south of Dilievka. So it's a continuation. Lancets are now literally a norm on the front line right now. Basically every front line there is Lancet reports of Lancet attacks. Ukrainian forces in the Niu-York Front attack from the Pripnishny region as well as in the Sumy region. There is geolocation of Ukrainian forces in this area here of New York. They were attacking or pushing towards some settlements being geolocated, but it was not reported by any sources to say that there was an attack. I'm not sure it's a dated video or not. We shall see how this goes. And so that is the situation over in the New York Front. Interesting that they are continue to try to attack in this direction. Maybe they are trying to threaten Holivka, because this is a major city, a very strategically important city. And if the Ukrainians can threaten Holivka, then yeah, maybe that's going to give the Russians some food for thought. So we move into the Avdiivka Front, where the food for thought is currently happening for the Ukrainians. The Russians are attacking towards Ocheretiny in the Novobakhmutivka region, towards northward towards Novokalinove, towards Stepove. There is fighting reported off Krutabalka towards the Donetsk filtration station. And then there is continued offensive operation in the south of Avdiivka. Ukrainians are constantly counter-attacking as well in this area here. I think did they counter-attack here? No, that's the geolocation. Okay, so and the Russians are also reportedly attacking at Opitny, towards Tonenke, at Povomaisky and Nevelsky. So this is the strategic situation at Avdiivka Front. Very intense, as you can see the number of arrows over in this area here. But we shall continue to monitor how this goes. And we go into details a bit. In the north, geolocation of Ukrainian forces in this tree line continue to show that the Russians are still being bogged down in the Novobakhmutivka region. And we move, and this area here, I mentioned this is a frontline change, but I already talked about it. The other frontline changes was that the Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian side, the Ukrainian mapping starting to acknowledge that the Russians seems to be making some progress off the vineyard, and the Russians are taking some further grounds in this area here, which signals the failure of the Ukrainian counterattack in this area here to push the Russian out of the Avdiivka city entirely. So this is not working out tentatively. The Russians are taking ground. And over at the Opine region, the Deep State UA actually acknowledged that the Russians have captured some grounds in this area here, particularly is this tree line in this area here. So that's all for the Avdiivka Front. We move into the Donetsk Front. So this is Donetsk city, and this is Donetsk Front. And on the eastern part of the Donetsk Front, in the Marinka Novomikhailivka sector, The Russian forces continue their attack towards Georgievka. Ukrainians are pushing back with counterattacks. Russians are also pushing at Boyeda in the north of Novomikhailivka, in the northeast of Novomikhailivka, and at Novomikhailivka itself. Ukrainians are counterattacking at Novomikhailivka, but I'm not sure where the direction they are counterattacking. And the significant part in this front line is actually the deep state UAs mapping acknowledge that the Russians have captured the managerial region. In fact, even progressed quite a number of distance towards Novomikhailivka, and now the mapping is more similar to what the Russian mappings are, which means the Russian mapping was actually correct. So there is this catch up to this. Over in the western part of the Donetsk Front, there is geolocation of Ukrainian forces getting hit by FPV drones north of Shevchenko. At the Novodonetsk region, the Russians are still continuing to push towards Zolota Neva. And this is actually pretty significant, as 24th to 27 we are already seeing the push. 28 there was no report. 29 it was a continuation. So the Zolota Neva's push seems to be rather serious. The Russians seems to be rather serious about pushing Zolota Neva, and serious push can also be a diversion, because you need to convince the enemy that you are really serious and force them to redeploy troops to your front line, and then you actually run away and don't fight. So that could be the case. And for those that are wondering, I'm actually very, very sleepy. I haven't slept. It's around coming to 20 hours already, so I'm very, very sleepy now. And over at the Zaporizhzhia Front, this is Zaporizhzhia city, and this is the Zaporizhzhia Front. At the Zaporizhzhia Front, Velika Novosilka sector, this is Velika Novosilka, and the sector is here. There is some actions in this area here, with fighting reported towards Makarivka in the west of Staromayorsky. Ukrainians attack south of Rivnopil, Russian attack north of Prione, and Ukrainians are attacking south towards Prione. However, this is the weird one, because when you look at the frontline change, is actually the opposite. It is the Ukrainians are actually the one that is attacking in the north, and the Russians are the one attacking in the south. So it's a very, very interesting differences between the actual report and the actual geolocation. And there is also geolocation of Ukrainian forces getting hit by Russian forces. So in Vremivka, as well as northeast of Rivnopil. There's nothing over at the Huyaipole sector. The Chevrolet situation is not continued. Over at the Orikhiv sector. So this Orikhiv city, and this is the sector. The Russian forces continue their attack at Nesteryanka, at Robotine, and as well as west of Vrobove. And the Nesteryanka one, like I said, this is the one to watch, because this the Robotine and the Vrobove one seems to be not really moving. Is still very positional in nature, it seems. But Nesteryanka one is very, very interesting, because this is strategically a very significant location, and it can drive an attack towards Orikhiv and force the fighting to be concentrated at Orikhiv. And if that's the case, the entire front line in this salient at Vrobove and Robotine will be closed by the Russians, because the Ukrainians will be kept too busy protecting the more important city of Orikhiv. So this is currently the situation. And over at the Kayamsky sector, the Russians are attacking Kayamsky this time round instead of Pyatikaki. We shall continue to monitor the situation. And over at this the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant on the opposite shore, the Russians are conducting some attacks on the opposite shore. And it might be a case where the Ukrainians have some gathering of forces. Maybe they are preparing for some raid towards the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And this actually attracted attention, which is why we have some videos of geolocation of a Russian attack at Dobra Nadia. So let's see how this goes. And over at the Kherson Front. So this is the Kherson Front, and this is Kherson City. Russian forces continue to hit targets over on the northern bank of the Dnieper River, and within the the beachhead or bridgehead, the Russian forces continue to be attacking Ukrainian bridgehead, most likely at Krinky, and that's it from the Kherson Front. And that's it. This is the summary for the day of 703 to 705 for the 27 to 29 of January. So some conclusion. So I talked about conclusion, whether to bring it back. So let's bring it back. And so conclusion is about my opinions, and this is not about, it's not reporting per se. It's more like opinion or analysis. And I continue to watch, focus a lot on the Belgorod or Kursk region, or the Sumy, Kharkiv region, because all these Russian attacks, the shelling, the drone strike, artillery, they even use air strikes, and occasionally, once in a blue moon, there is some raids, and this is very, very disturbing, because it means that the Russians are poised, they are preparing the ground for some offensive, and most likely they will go for Kharkiv again. This is what I think. I think they will go for Kharkiv, as well as going through Volchansk to head towards Kupyansk from the west. And this is going to relieve the forces over the Kupyansk Front and create a massive collapse. That, of course, depends on the Ukrainians. How well are they defending the border region between the Kharkiv and Belgorod region? And this could be the initial diversion, and causing a rush. And when the Ukrainians are making the concentration forces in the Kharkiv region to do whatever they can to prevent the fall of Kupyansk Front, the Russians then push through to Sumy, and then they can actually go for another wild run across the northern Ukraine. So this is what I think, something to watch. Of course, it may not happen, it may not happen, but the Ukrainians have to they have to consider that this is a possibility, and any breakthrough, especially through Volchansk, is going to cause a direct threat towards Kupyansk, and so that is going to be a problem. And the Kupyansk Front is also very interesting. This breakthrough from Kreminna is particularly interesting, as the Ukrainian forces, the territorial defense in this area here got broke down. I think the Ukrainians also seems to have trouble bringing in their more experienced troops, and also the equipments to come to reinforce this line, which the failure of which now lost Avdiivka, and with the Russian forces continue to put pressure on Avdiivka, which is here, as well as moving south towards Berestove. So the Russian forces are pushing westward towards Pishani from the south of Kreminna, and they are now going to push from the newly taken Avdiivka towards Pishani, which is causing a pincer. And this pincer is going to be very difficult to defend if the Ukrainian forces are still not formed up, because ultimately you should have to understand that the front line has suddenly changed by 3 kilometers or even 4 kilometers or 5 kilometers suddenly within a week. And this sudden change means that the Ukrainian forces in these rear positions will have no time to dig in, unless they already prepare all this entrenchment. They have the 3rd or 4th line of defense. I personally not too sure if they have prepared that, or the Ukrainian forces are prepared to do that, because you can have trenches but you don't have mines, and you have no mines or no prepared anti-tank guided missiles positions or heavy machine gun positions. It's going to be difficult to defend against a heavy attack. So we will continue to monitor to see how the Russians going to play out this situation, and let's see what else do I have an opinion on. Not this area here is really very stagnant. There's some frontline changes, but I don't think it's going to change a lot. Kreminna Front is really creamy, is all creamed up. The Perezhny is a very interesting report. Like I mentioned during the SITREP, the Russian Defense Ministry mentioned Ukrainian attacking in the area of Perezhny. Seems to suggest that the Russians have some positions near to Perezhny for them to call out or use this this name, this location name, and I find this very interesting. It might reflect a possible frontline change that is still not reported or known by any of the open source intelligence. So we shall continue to monitor to see if this is the case. If it is true, which means that the Russian forces may have captured all these hills. These are all the hills north of Vasily, that's overlooking Vasily, and these are all very strong positions, defensive positions for the Ukrainians. And if Perezhny is a sign that the Russians have captured all these hills, there is going to be a big problem, because the Russians will be breaking through to Vimka very, very quickly. So I just want to continue to highlight that yeah, this kind of thing is how intel work. This is just taking small signals and try to understand what could it be meaning. And of course, it's not absolute. This is not the truth. It's just a way to guide our minds to try to spot things. Bakhmut Front has basically went dead. It's basically now a positional warfare thing. Ukrainians are trying at Niu-York. At Shumi, they are attacking Pivdene. In this area as well, due to the geolocation, we now know in the north of Shorobalka and Pinishne. And the objective is Holivka. To at least threaten Holivka. Holivka is super important because if you see, this is Donetsk city, and it leads up to Holivka, and Holivka leads up to Bakhmut. This chain of these three cities is what is supporting the Russian offensive. They are providing the Russians a base to operate from. So Holivka, if broken, is going to be disastrous for the Russians, as the Ukrainian forces would head in this direction, and they can cause a lot of problems if and especially if the Russians have no defending forces in the rear of Holivka, or they do not have a very good prepared position. Then the Ukrainians can have a breakthrough, but it looks very unlikely because the initiative is really on the Russian side. And over at the Avdiivka Front, the Russians are attacking in all directions. The Ukrainians still have not acknowledged the capture of this stronghold north of Spartak. They call it Zenith or Zenit in terms of this name. The Russians are continuing to make slow but gradual progress in the south. Pressure continues to be built up all along the front line, but Ukrainians are defending well so far. The only problem is the south. The south is really falling apart. So we look at the south again. The Russians are pushing towards the filtration station. They are either closing the gap, or they already closed the gap, and they are trying to retain to get the full control of the southern neighborhood. And they are also pushing out of Opitne, and the Ukrainian forces seems to be falling back in all directions. So the Ukrainians, however, are counterattacking, particularly towards this neighborhood. So we continue to monitor and see how this goes, whether there will be more breakthroughs from the Russian side, or the Ukrainians will be able to hold the line, or even counterattack and push them back. But I think counterattack and push them back is rather unlikely, because this area here is too entrenched. There's too much trenches and defensive positions in the south of Avdiivka, which means that the Russians can use them. These are all built by the Ukrainians, but the Russians can use them. So that is something to note. And Novomihailivka, this is a long time coming. The Russians have already claimed the front line is here for a very long time, super long, and the Ukrainians finally acknowledged the loss of this territory. I'm not sure why. Perhaps there could be some geolocation that I did not see, that the Deep State UA have seen, which allows them to acknowledge the loss of this territory. So we will continue to monitor. The Russians are still trying to attack Novomihailivka in multiple directions. However, the assault in the south has already been abandoned tentatively. They are not trying anymore. And another one of this I think is important to note. Zolota Neva. This one we have to take a look. This is looking very serious. If the Russians take this settlement, it's going to be quite a lot of problems for Voleda, because Voleda is under threat from both sides. The Russians are trying to push to capture Konstantinivka, and they are now pushing towards Zolota Neva. And if they take Zolota Neva, this road is gone. Konstantinivka, this road is gone. Then reinforcing Voleda is going to be a problem. But of course, nowadays Voleda, the reinforcement is coming mainly from Konstantinivka. Prishestivka is very hard because Palivka is already been captured. So anyway, other ways are they have to go through the farms, through Bohoyelenka. So we shall see how this goes. And the rest of the front line, I think, is not that interesting, except for, like I said, Nesterianka. This is also very important. Heading towards Orikhiv, force the fighting to be concentrated at Orikhiv. The Ukrainian forces will have to withdraw from the salients because they will not be able to concentrate at defending this area here. But we shall see how this goes. This is just my projections. And yeah, that's it. This is the conclusions. And thank you for watching. Do press the like button, subscribe. And hopefully you like the format. It does takes a bit of editing. But if I have no time, I will not edit. I just have to tell you in advance. But when I have time, if I can, I will do the editing. And thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next update.